she was meant to disappear. A shy girl who lost her voice to fear, and her loyal German shepherd, just a stray nobody wanted. But when danger cornered them and courage finally rose, the entire room froze. And a single father's life changed forever. Before we begin this unforgettable journey of loyalty, healing, and God-given miracles, make sure to subscribe to the channel, so you never miss a story that reminds us hope still wins. Winter pressed itself across Bozeman, Montana, in a vast hush of white and wind, the mountains looming like silent guardians against a silver-gray sky. In a weather-worn cabin at the edge of the pines lived Daniel Walker, a man in his early 40s whose broad shoulders and calloused carpenter's hands told a lifetime of building for others, though his own life felt perpetually unfinished. His beard, dark brown, threaded with early snow silver, framed a square jaw that clenched more often than it ever softened, and his eyes, a deep forest green, carried the quiet ache of a husband who had once laughed loudly and now carried grief like an extra rib. He drove an aging blue Ford pickup that rattled like a stubborn old friend refusing to quit. Daniel spent his days shaping cedar and pine into cabinets and rocking chairs, but by night he became a guardian of silence, hovering protectively near his daughter, afraid that speaking too loudly might shatter what little remained of her fragile spirit. Lily Walker, 12 years old, was slender as a reed. Her long blonde hair often pulled into a loose ponytail that hid half her pale, freckled face. Her features were soft, innocently so, but her posture carried the wary stiffness of someone bracing for an impact that never came. Her light blue eyes were lovely once, full of spring water brightness, but now they kept the world at a safe distance, widening only when fear pressed too close. She used to sing everywhere, to the birds, to the mirror, to the moon. But after the car accident that took her mother 2 years ago, a night filled with glittery costumes and rehearsed courage for a school performance that never happened, her voice had folded inward, like a petal closing against frost. She spoke, but only in small sentences and only to Daniel, and even then there was always an invisible wall between the end of her words and the start of her breath, as though fear might steal her away if she dared to sound too alive. The highway into town was a frozen ribbon that afternoon as Daniel returned from the lumber yard, his truck struggling against gusts that screamed down from the mountains. He hummed an old tune under his breath, a habit from happier years, and the heater coughed warm air in irregular breaths, like it too remembered better times. As he turned onto a side road near an abandoned dog sled training compound, something flickered in his peripheral vision, a blur of black and tan. He almost ignored it, but then came a desperate bark, hoarse, shredded, and trembling. Daniel braked hard, tires crunching over ice. Just beyond the sagging chain-link fence stood a German shepherd, ribs faintly visible under his thick winter coat. His fur was mostly sable, dark across his back, fading to warm gold around strong legs, ears alert but drooping slightly at the tips, like strength had been his whole identity until someone took too much of it away. His amber eyes were the most arresting thing, penetrating, intelligent, and filled with the particular kind of sadness shared by those who have known belonging and then lost it. A faded leather collar still clung to his neck, its tag missing. He didn't growl at Daniel's approach. Instead, he took a step backward, torn between fight and surrender. Daniel crouched, palm open to the freezing wind. "Hey there, buddy," he murmured, letting the warmth in his voice reach where hands might not yet be welcome. The dog's ears twitched, his breath fogged the air. Another step backward, then, with a small whimper, a hesitant step forward. Boots slipping slightly, Daniel draped his heavy coat around the trembling body, feeling sharp bones beneath fur. The weight of the dog leaned into him, just enough to say, "I won't run." Back in the cabin, Lily stood at the bottom of the stairs, frozen like a deer spotting danger. The dog, still wrapped in Daniel's coat, lifted his head and looked at her, not with the wild energy of a threat, but with the solemn caution of a survivor recognizing another. Lily's fingers curled around the wooden stair rail, a silent question hanging in the air. Daniel answered gently, his voice softer than she'd heard in months. "I found him alone, just like us." The dog lay near the fireplace, muscles relaxing inch by inch, tail giving only the smallest twitch. Lily sat a careful distance away, arms around her knees, studying him with the curiosity of someone who had forgotten how to trust anything, including herself. And yet, when the dog finally closed his eyes and exhaled as though sleep was no longer dangerous, Lily whispered the first vulnerable word she had offered a stranger since her mother died. "Ranger." The dog's ear twitched, as if he accepted. Daniel watched them both and felt something shift inside him. Small but sure, like the first note of a song trying to return after a long winter of silence. Outside, the wind still raged. But inside, a faint warmth took root, the kind that hinted that maybe, just maybe, their quiet life would not stay quiet forever, now that Ranger had found them. Morning crept into the Walker cabin slowly, as though daylight itself was cautious not to disturb the new, delicate peace forming around the three souls within its wooden walls. Daniel Walker woke first, the familiar creak of his spine reminding him that building cabinets and carrying grief both took their toll. He brewed coffee, strong and dark, and glanced toward the living room where Ranger lay curled on a makeshift dog bed, his thick sable fur now clean and brushed, catching glints of firelight. The German shepherd appeared healthier already, though still lean enough to see hints of ribs beneath the coat. Daniel guessed he was young, maybe 3 years old, with a sturdiness in his frame that promised strength once food and safety returned to his life. His ears lifted when he sensed Daniel watching, and his amber eyes, clearer after a night of real warmth, tracked the man with cautious interest. Upstairs, Lily Walker lingered in front of her mirror longer than usual. She was still slender, still hiding behind her blonde hair, but today her pale blue eyes carried a flicker of curiosity instead of constant fear. She dressed in a soft gray sweater, her mother's last birthday gift, then touched the fabric like seeking courage stitched into its threads. Descending the stairs, she paused halfway when Ranger spotted her. He didn't bark or leap. Instead, he rose slowly, tail sweeping the floor once, twice, as if saying, "I'm here, but only if you want me to be." That gentle patience made her chest tighten, a pressure that felt like the echo of something she used to know. Trust. Later that morning, Daniel decided they should take Ranger to town to check if anyone was looking for him, though a quiet part of him hoped no one was. Their first stop was Pine Valley Veterinary Clinic, a modest brick building with frosted windows decorated by children's drawings of smiling cats and scarves. Inside, the air smelled of antiseptic and wet fur. Dr. Megan Hart introduced herself, a tall woman in her mid-30s with copper hair pulled into a tidy ponytail, freckles across fair skin, and warm hazel eyes that seemed specially designed to soothe anxious animals and grieving people alike. Her voice was calm, low-pitched, and her steady hands hinted at years of steadying frightened creatures. She scanned Ranger with a microchip reader, while Lily watched from behind Daniel's arm like a shadow, unsure if it should attach or flee. "No, Chip," Dr. Hart said softly, giving the big dog a gentle scratch under the chin. "Whoever had him didn't take proper steps to keep him safe." She glanced at the faint scars visible beneath Ranger's fur, thin, pale lines across his flank, and her smile dimmed. "He's seen hardship, but he's not aggressive, just lost." Lily swallowed, stepping forward a little. "He's smart." Her voice was a whisper, but in the quiet clinic it felt like a bell ringing. Dr. Hart softened even more at hearing the girl speak. "Smart dogs choose their people," she said. "Looks like he's already chosen you." After checking Ranger's weight, paws, and teeth, confirming he was malnourished but healthy, Dr. Hart handed Lily a bag of treats and a quiet smile. "Take care of him, sweetheart. He's going to take care of you right back." On the drive home, Daniel watched Lily through the rearview mirror as she giggled silently when Ranger tried to nuzzle her hand for another treat. That sound, or almost sound, was worth more than any song Daniel had ever heard. At home, Daniel pulled out the old guitar again. He tuned the strings with slow reverence, a carpenter's precision applied to music he once believed could save his family. Ranger curled beside Lily on the rug, his body pressed against her leg as though anchoring her to a world she feared might disappear if she breathed too loudly. Daniel began to strum the simple chords of a lullaby his late wife used to hum. Lily's breath hitched at the familiar melody, pain first sharp as broken glass, then warmth rushing after like sunlight melting frost. Without realizing, she began humming along, soft, fragile, but there. Ranger lifted his head, ears twitching toward her voice, settling only when he recognized it as something good, something safe. Daniel didn't stop playing, afraid the magic would vanish if he let silence return. He watched his daughter carefully, seeing the way her jaw loosened, how the walls around her voice cracked, just a little. Each note Lily offered felt like an old memory daring to breathe again. And Ranger, loyal guardian, stayed pressed against her the whole time, a silent protector, helping her reclaim a part of herself she thought had died that terrible night in the car. When the last chord faded, Lily reached down and buried her fingers in Ranger's thick fur. He looked up, eyes shining with a devotion that asked for nothing but the chance to stay. Daniel swallowed against the lump rising in his throat. Something extraordinary was happening in his living room. Ranger was not just a stray. He was becoming the bridge between a lost father, a muted child, and the music that remembered exactly where hope had been left waiting. A week rolled by in gentle shifts, like snow sliding off an old roof, one softened inch at a time, and each day Ranger grew stronger, while Lily's silence weakened just enough to let small sounds through its cracks. At school, however, fear still clung to her like a second shadow. Pine Valley Middle School, a red brick building built long before modern comforts, was ruled by loud hallways and sharper whispers. In the cafeteria that Thursday, Lily walked with her tray tucked to her chest when a sudden voice pierced the air, high and mocking. It belonged to Chloe Benson, a tall, slim girl with perfectly curled caramel hair and designer boots that never touched mud. Chloe's hazel eyes were bright like polished glass, pretty but cold, as if kindness was a language she refused to learn. She and her friends always sat at the center table, laughing too loudly to hide their insecurity. "Careful, Walker," Chloe called, flipping her hair over a glossy shoulder. "Don't faint again. The floor's dirty, and you might ruin your sweater." Lily stiffened, every muscle remembering the humiliation of the night she'd collapsed on the stage, spotlight blinding her, laughter stabbing her spine. She ducked her head and rushed past. At the quiet lunch table near the windows sat Emma Brooks, a small girl with curly chestnut hair, round glasses constantly slipping down her nose, and a kindness that made her blush when spoken to. She admired Lily secretly, recognizing in her a reflection of her own fears. Emma offered a soft smile when Lily sat down, but Lily only nodded, her gaze all clouds. The rest of the day passed in careful silence until Lily stepped off the bus, where Ranger waited at full alert, ears sharp like radar tuned to her heartbeat. He trotted beside her up the snowy path, each step grounding her to a life beyond school hallways. That evening, Daniel entered the living room carrying a folded paper with cautious pride. "There's news," he said, setting the guitar gently aside. Lily sat cross-legged with Ranger's head in her lap, fingers buried in his warm fur. "What news?" she asked. Voice thin but present, Daniel turned the paper to show her a bold headline: "Winter Talent Showcase. Auditions next week." The words felt like a ghost returning, their edges sharp with memory and possibility. Lily's heart clenched, her throat tightened. No. She couldn't stand on a stage again, not with those eyes watching, waiting for her to fall. "I can't," she whispered. "I'll fail again." Daniel knelt, his broad frame cast in a protective shadow. "You don't have to do anything alone," he promised, voice steady as oak. "You'd have me beside you, and Ranger." At his name, the dog raised his head, amber eyes intense and loyal. He nosed Lily's palm, urging her to believe what her fear denied. Daniel continued. "One song. Not for them, for you, for Mom." The mention of her mother stirred old warmth and old hurt, braided so tightly she couldn't separate them. The room felt small, her breaths too loud. Then Ranger shifted fully into her lap, pressing close, his silent message declaring that he would stand between her and every cruel laugh in the world. She rested her forehead on his strong shoulder, inhaling the scent of pine smoke and dog fur. Later, Daniel tuned his guitar again. His fingers remembered melodies his heart had locked away years ago. Lily hesitated, but Ranger bumped her knee until she followed him to the center of the room. Her voice, when it came, sounded like fragile glass trying to remember how sunlight feels, shaken but unbroken. She sang softly while Ranger's brown ears flicked forward, listening as if memorizing every note to protect it later. For the first time, her voice did not fall apart when doubt rose. Ranger held the line, anchoring her in courage. When the song ended, Daniel's eyes shone, not with grief, but with a pride he hadn't dared feel in too long. Lily looked down at Ranger. "You'll be with me if I try?" Ranger's tail swept the floor once, twice, his vow, and that was enough to lift her chin, enough to breathe out 3 trembling words. "Let's do it." Daniel set the audition flyer gently on the coffee table. Tomorrow they would sign her name. Not because the world deserved to hear her voice, but because she did. The night of the Winter Talent Showcase arrived, dressed in glittering frost. The gymnasium of Pine Valley Middle transformed into a makeshift theater with folding chairs, creased curtains, and a borrowed spotlight that flickered like a nervous heartbeat. Daniel Walker stood backstage, tuning his old guitar, his large carpenter hands steadying trembling strings while his forest green eyes watched Lily with a father's terror disguised as calm. Lily Walker, wearing a simple navy dress that contrasted her fair skin and golden hair, felt the room tighten like a fist around her rib cage. Her pale blue eyes darted from the stage entrance to Ranger, who sat at her feet like a fortress made of fur and loyalty. She smoothed her dress again and again, fingers trembling against fabric that suddenly felt too thin to hide fear. Kids chattered and laughed around her, confident performers who hadn't had their voices broken, while she stood silent, pressing her shoe lightly against Ranger's back to keep herself tethered to something solid. One of the teachers, Mrs. Karen Doyle, a short woman with curly gray hair and bright red glasses, bustled around checking microphones. Her cheerful energy was almost too much for the nervous backstage crowd, but she paused when she saw Lily, offering a warm squeeze to the girl's shoulder. Mrs. Doyle's wrinkles deepened when she smiled, lines carved from decades of cheering for kids who doubted themselves. "You'll do wonderfully," she whispered with a sincerity so real it hurt. But encouragement couldn't drown out the sharp whispers spreading through the crowd. Chloe Benson, flawless as always in a glittering gold jacket, stood nearby with two friends. Her caramel curls bounced as she laughed, hazel eyes gleaming with mischief. "She's really bringing a dog on stage?" Chloe mocked, voice pitched high to attract attention. "What's he gonna do? Sing, too?" The group giggled. Lily flinched. Ranger's ears shot up. Daniel clenched his jaw, knuckles whitening on the guitar neck, but he kept his focus on Lily. This was her battle, not Chloe's performance of cruelty. The stage lights dimmed as the MC, a tall, thin man named Mr. Leonard Hayes, his brown hair gelled stiffly and his nervous smile revealing a timid personality shaped by too many school board meetings, stepped up to the mic. He called out each act with a booming theatricality he didn't quite have the confidence to own. When he finally announced, "Up next, Lily Walker," accompanied by her support dog, a few snickers scattered through the audience like thrown stones. Lily's breath caught, tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. Ranger pressed his warm body into her leg, and she placed one trembling hand on his head. "Okay," she breathed, voice so soft Ranger had to feel it rather than hear it. They stepped into the light. The gym fell strangely quiet, not respectful but expectant, like a crowd waiting for a car crash. Daniel sat on a small stool stage left, guitar ready. Lily stood center stage, Ranger positioned protectively in front of her, ears forward, muscles ready to defend. Daniel strummed the first chord, gentle, familiar. Lily's heart beat in her throat. She stared at Ranger, not the faces lurking beyond the glare. Then she opened her mouth. A tiny sound escaped, a humming note, fragile as thin ice, but it was music. The audience shifted. Lily inhaled again, deeper this time, and let the melody flow, her voice trembling yet pure, rising like something she thought had drowned. But just as courage began to take shape, a sudden loud crash, some jerk in the crowd knocking over a metal chair, shattered concentration. Laughter erupted, led by Chloe's sharp voice. "Oops! There she goes again!" Lily stiffened, terror flooding her veins, breath collapsing in her chest. The spotlight blurred. The room tilted. Ranger launched forward with a sharp bark. One, then a warning growl that vibrated through the wooden stage. His stance widened, body a shield of fierce devotion. The laughter died instantly. Even the air held still. Ranger didn't snarl to threaten. He growled to protect what was breaking. Lily dropped to her knees, wrapping her arms around him, burying her face in his thick fur. The microphone caught the soft, hiccuping sob she couldn't swallow. She tried to stand again, but the fear was too heavy, and her voice, once a promise, crumbled under unforgiven eyes. Daniel abandoned the stool and crossed the stage in 2 strides, kneeling and gathering both daughter and dog into his arms. The curtain fell quickly, teachers scrambling to regain order. It wasn't the triumphant moment he'd prayed for, but as Daniel carried Lily into the backstage hallway, Ranger pressed close to her side. She whispered just 4 shaken words into the dog's fur, words Daniel barely caught. "You still stayed, Ranger." And though the world outside that curtain had not heard her voice finish its song, Ranger had. And in that moment, it was enough. Snow fell softly the morning after the showcase, as if Montana itself wanted to cushion the sting of the night before. Daniel Walker brewed coffee while Lily lingered on the couch with Ranger's warm body curled against her legs, his steady breath syncing with hers, reminding her she was still here and she was not alone. Daniel's deep forest green eyes didn't miss the puffy red rims around hers, but he didn't say anything. Not yet. Instead, he placed Lily's favorite mug, decorated with faded musical notes, on the coffee table and sat quietly. Ranger's ears twitched, detecting the tension words weren't ready to carry. A knock broke the silence. When Daniel opened the door, a woman stood wrapped in a long burgundy coat, her soft brown hair dusted with snowflakes. She was Ellie Carter, mid-30s, skin fair and cheeks flushed pink from the cold. Her eyes, an earnest blue, held a gentle confidence, like someone who had learned how to speak kindly into fragile places without breaking them. She carried a folder tucked to her chest. "I hope this isn't a bad time," she said with a careful, professional tone, but Daniel saw the compassion beneath it. Ellie introduced herself as a child psychologist who volunteered with an art support program sponsored by the school district. She had attended the showcase, seated near the back. Ellie knelt a respectful distance from Lily and Ranger, letting the dog sniff her glove first. "I heard your voice begin last night," she said softly. "That took more courage than most people will show in their lifetime." Lily stared at her lap, cheeks pink. Ellie continued, "And maybe the stage wasn't ready for you yesterday, but the world will be." From her folder, she pulled out a form printed with bright stars and musical notes. Community Winter Concert. Warm hearts, warm paws. Ellie smiled gently. "We would love it if you and Ranger performed. A safe space. People who know how to listen." In that moment, Lily didn't speak, but Ranger stood nudging her shoulder before resting his chin on her knee. The message was clear. We try again. Days of gentle practice followed. No spotlights, no jeers. Daniel played guitar by the fireplace while Lily sat cross-legged beside Ranger, singing softly into his fur. Each rehearsal made the cracks in her voice smoother, like snow melting into a quiet river. On the night of the community concert, the venue was the town library, small, cozy, filled with people bundled in scarves and hope. Paper snowflakes hung from the ceiling, hand-cut by children whose laughter didn't wound. The audience included Mrs. Karen Doyle and Emma Brooks, who waved excitedly when Lily entered. Even Mr. Hayes attended, his awkward frame squeezed into an overly festive sweater with reindeer antlers. But Chloe Benson was nowhere in sight, a blessing Lily didn't dare question. Ranger trotted confidently beside Lily to the small stage, tail swaying like a marching flag of bravery. Daniel sat beside her, guitar ready. Ellie Carter stood in the back, hands clasped beneath her chin. As Lily faced the audience, fear fluttered in her ribs, but when she looked at Ranger, amber eyes steady, ears pointed as if guarding her heart, she found the breath to begin. Her voice floated into the warm room, gentle but growing stronger with every note, like sunrise melting frost. Ranger remained at her feet, head high, chest lifted, her silent harmony. When Daniel joined in, the lullaby transformed into something new, a song stitched together by love, grief, healing, and Paws that never once let go. By the final note, the room was silent in reverence. Then applause rose, soft at first, then swelling into warmth so genuine Lily felt it wrap around her like her dad's old flannel coat. Tears slipped down Daniel's cheeks, not from sadness this time, but from awe. The audience stood, and Emma's small voice squeaked above the clapping. "Way to go, Lily!" Lily's lungs finally loosened. She knelt to hug Ranger, burying her face in his fur. This time there was no panic, only gratitude. After the show, Ellie handed Lily a small booklet. Therapy, Dogs, and Young Voices. Programs for Courage. "Your guardian here," she nodded at Ranger, "is more than a pet. He's a partner in your story." On the walk home, snowflakes danced around them in quiet celebration. Ranger bumped Lily's hand with his nose until she giggled, a sound that had been gone too long. Daniel placed an arm carefully around his daughter's shoulders as they neared the cabin glowing with warm light inside. Tonight wasn't the end of her fear, but it was the beginning of her voice returning, not in a shout, but in a song carried by a loyal German shepherd who never once let silence win. Their family story was still being written, and now Ranger's paw prints guided the melody forward toward a future bright enough to sing aloud. When a frightened heart finds the courage to sing again, that is a miracle. A reminder that God often sends his angels on 4 paws and with wagging tails. In our everyday lives, hope may arrive quietly, but it always arrives right on time. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and leave a comment about your own miracles. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, so together we can keep spreading faith, healing, and the love God places in every loyal companion. May the Lord bless you and protect you, today and always.